Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Unfortunately, we're one man down today because Mohammed's had to deal with a child emergency, but he's okay, but unfortunately won't be joining us. So it's just going to be Joe, Anthony, and Mark, but I'm sure we'll do very well anyway. Today's going to be a little bit different, so we're just going to leave all questions till the end if that's okay, and you can either shout those out at the end or you can pop them on the chat and I'll shout them out for you as normal. Do please make sure that your microphone is turned off, makes it nice and smooth for the rest of us, and I'll be popping our Twitter handles on as normal on the chat as well. Any Twitter bugs out there, please do tag us, we'd very much appreciate it. But otherwise, I think let's just crack on. So Joe, Anthony, and Joe, if you want to kick us off with introducing yourself first, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Joe Price. I'm the Technical Director at Ethicist, and I've got a background specialism in Cycle and Umbraco.
Lovely. And Anthony?
Hi, Anthony Dang. I am the Head of Development at Liquid Metrics. I have been working with Umbraco since 2007.
And Mark?
Hello, everyone. So I'm Mark Everard. I'm Technical Director at Made to Engage. I've gone all corporate, and I specialise content management systems and Episerver. So I'm an Episerver EMVP.
Brilliant, thank you guys. So obviously we're here today to debunk the myth that CMS developers aren't real developers. I think it would be good if we kick off with, why do you guys think the stigma exists in the first place?
Yeah, sure. From my opinion, I think there's many reasons, but one of them is that certain CMSs allow you to build stuff really quickly without actually maybe even any development knowledge. So I've seen in the past where developers have maybe bundled sites together just using like packages or sort of pre-made code that is kind of off the shelf, ready to go. That being really good, you can build something very quickly, but sometimes it can restrict you, and it doesn't really take a developer, someone that's got sort of software engineering experience to actually do that. And so I think CMSs do enable poor development or non-development, but it can then tarnish developers or a lot of CMS developers to be of that trait, where it's definitely not. Where I think, yeah, if you follow actually it's good software practices and don't just bundle packages onto the system and actually build stuff yourself, and then work out where you could use packages to help sort of not reinvent the wheel, really complex things, that I think is the right way to go.
Yeah, following on to that, there are definitely benefits for small, simple projects which CMSs enable. So modern CMSs will be very accommodating to someone that's not very techy. So something like Squarespace is perfect for someone that doesn't do any code. But then you get a situation where people that don't do much code, but then they're asked to do something a bit more complicated, and then that's when things start becoming a bit hairy, because they were able to hack around some simple bits here and there, but then as soon as they've been asked to talk to a database, design some database schema, integrate with with something like Elasticsearch or something more rugged, then the code starts to show deficiencies, let's say.
Yeah, I think that's good. That's a really good point, where I think when a developer gets asked to do something a bit more complex and they maybe aren't so experienced in traditional software development, and some CMSs like Episerver, Cycle, and Umbraco that allow maybe development to go directly into like the razor views rather than following the traditional MVC package, MVC route, then it kind of enables the developer to develop poorly. And they may just follow sort of old documentation, and they're not experienced. There is a lot of opportunity for a developer to build things badly.
Yeah, I think just to jump onto what you said a little bit earlier, Joe, I think that the stigma for me comes from a lack of real definition around what a CMS developer is actually. There's two parts of that, and I think as you've just both mentioned there, CMSs actually have a number of technical things you can do. You can write code for them, you can enhance them, you can build, you can integrate them. And also there's a number of, I guess, more administrator type functions that you can do through the system itself. Sitecore, especially on that one, right? Really complex actually to do some of that part. And you end up with some people that have skills in certain areas. And what I think happens is that it's not well described around where people's specialisms are. Sitecore, absolutely, there is definitely a role. Episerver too, really, in a lot of cases. There's definitely a role for someone just to administer the system. Right? Often it's the same person as your developer, and I think that causes some of that confusion where people think that's the same part. Right? And I think actually, when you go out to find someone who you need to perform a role, you may end up getting someone with the wrong skill set. Right? I might end up accidentally getting a CMS administrator when I'm expecting them to do development tasks. And just like I think both Anthony and Joe have said, people are going to learn new skills, right? And you're not going to dabble. If I'm a CMS administrator, I might want to learn how to do a few more things that are slightly more complex, and they sort of bleed into where we might see a hard line of development. And I think that's the bit where you can end up with those experiences that are probably not favorable for other developers on the team, for people picking up that code or that solution, and probably not favorable for a client in many ways, because you just build up a lot of technical debt by somebody trying their best to learn something outside of their skill set.
And technical debt earns interest, as we all know.
It does. In some of those cases, having someone, I'll take a slightly different viewpoint here. Having somebody who will reach out and try and do a little bit more and improve their skills is great. What you've got to be able to provide them is a bit of guidance. There are lots of people that you can easily screw up a CMS implementation. You can easily bring down an Umbraco solution by messing around in the UI and changing the wrong thing, right? And that's problematic. That's where a bigger enterprise IT would no doubt have some controls and make sure there are access controls, and you can't do that. But most clients actually don't have that, because they need that same person to have that ability to make some of those changes, because sometimes you need it. Sometimes you've not got a full development team there. So I think it's really around setting those boundaries and kind of understanding them. That's kind of where I see the problem resides.
I think one of the big things is I think we all work for sort of agencies or sort of something on the similar lines, where a lot of agencies are known to be doing sort of CMS development more than maybe traditional sort of web application development. I think they're kind of very much known for that. And sometimes when projects go sort of belly up or not as expected by the client, they can get passed between agency to agency, and that's where sort of other agencies start tarnishing the sort of the regional agency that built that, saying they're poor developers, they're the sort of traditional CMS developers, we're application developers, we're a software house or something like that. And I think that's where, because projects can get passed between different agencies, that's when the tarnishing comes in, because that exposure of other people's code does get passed around. I don't think CMS developers are particularly poor, but because their projects maybe are exposed more, a normal C# MVC developer could just be as terrible or worse. So I think it's that tarnishing that needs to get removed.
Yeah.
And one of the things of being agencies as well, that I've definitely experienced this in the past, where agencies have sold technology stacks that their developers don't have experience with. They go, oh, look, they're Umbraco developers. Yeah, they can do Episerver. It's all the same thing, or they can do Sitecore. And then it's at the developers it's down to them now to sort of work out how to build the platform using this new technology that is very new to them. And they're learning as they go on the job, and that's where these mistakes happen, and that's where sort of this tarnishing of CMS developers don't build things very well can come along.
Yeah, I actually had that experience where a client wanted us to comment on why Umbraco was going to be a good platform for their developers to start building stuff on. And it's like, hang on, none of your developers know Umbraco yet? Like, nope. They expected to build all of their systems using this new technology. And I'm like, okay, this is going to take a while. Like, you can't just jump in to a new technology and expect everyone to have good results. I mean, it's something that you need to learn. You need to hire some experts.
So why do you guys think it's important to debunk this myth in the first place then?
I think because it's clear for like hiring managers, like project managers, even like CTOs of businesses to sort of really understand roles, because I think these people can actually understand the purpose of an individual's role. So kind of what are they hiring for? What do they need out of their developers? And so you can challenge your developers in the right way as well. So you're not just a CMS developer. I'm not just going to assume that you're a poor developer because you've got that label. Actually understand they could be actually a really good developer, and you could actually push those developers into other areas of software engineering.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, go on, you guys. It's fun.
Okay. So I was just about to say that I was actually turned down for a role once where the reasoning was that I didn't have enough .NET experience. And I was thinking, hang on, Umbraco is made on .NET. It's a C# developer's playground. If you know anything about Umbraco, then you would know that it follows world-class design patterns. It exposes a whole bunch of APIs which are just a pleasure to use, and it takes all the mundane stuff, it does it for you, so that you can concentrate on the more valuable aspects of the project, like architecting a solution well, interacting with third-party applications, more complicated algorithms, for instance. You don't have to do things like database interaction. Why reinvent the wheel?
Yeah, I think it's an important myth to debunk because it's a myth, right? That's the reason why it's important to get rid of that. A lot of, I've worked with a number of great developers. Some of them really enjoy the problem space of a CMS. Right? It doesn't make them a less developer just because they really like the fact that they're delivering something that's customer facing and they enjoy, working with big brands. Again, it's not fair on them. Underneath all of this stuff, you've got people that are good developers, and I think increasingly as more and more things are powered by technology, you're going to find there are more and more specialisms on that. And I think as Anthony said earlier, or even Joe said, I've got similar experiences where people have just said, you're a great C# developer. I'm going to throw you on a Sitecore project. I'm sure you'll be fine. And the reality is it's still going to take a while to learn those platforms. Umbraco's constantly developed, Episerver's constantly developed, Sitecore is. They are all increasing their capability, feature sets, and all of the things they offer. So from a developer, there's actually a real specialism to know that, right? That's my background, and Joe will know that as well from Sitecore. Going in there and selecting a CMS is a very important part, but also having the experts there to make you use it is really important too. So, for me, the myth is usually just when people underestimate, I guess, the expertise needed, right? I think that's another reason why it appears.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Actually, it's underestimating that expertise, because it's a real expertise, and I think hiring for kind of specialists, always for the last sort of 10 years, it's always been a real challenge for me to try and get really sort of high quality developers that understand the CMS you're looking for. And I see it's not an easy thing to do when you're looking for those really sort of highly experienced developers, as much as you would look for a normal application developer.
Yeah, I think I always look for good developers, right? Finding good developers is difficult. Finding good developers who really want to specialize in CMS and a particular CMS is even more difficult. So, we all know that the challenges of making sure you get the right people in your team, it just means that sometimes you might have to accept you're going to have to train them up and give them more skills and experience. But, from a learning a system, or again, not underestimating the how long it takes you to learn one of those things. They're not too hard. They all have training courses. You can do it, but it is a specialism. You're not just going to go into a project like that and be able to deliver on that one. We've probably all got the same horror stories. I've got similar ones across slightly different technical sphere, but it has the same sort of myths around it, and that's marketing automation. So again, really hot topic, I guess, in terms of digital at the minute, but the same challenges. I had a CIO that just went, "It's all right, Mark, you and your team can learn that, can't you?" Well, yeah, we can, but how long are you going to give it for us? And then also we went out and trying to find a number of people to support that. And we found a number of marketing consultants, and actually they understood the domain really well, Did they understand how to use that big enterprise platform called Adobe Campaign? No, they didn't actually. And you know, it was a really weird system in between. And CMSs go that way as well, as you try and make them easier and less expensive to own. Actually, one of the reasons you do that is you're trying to remove the need for developers, because we're expensive, right? Actually, but that's a good thing for us because it means we get higher salaries. But you know, as a business, you want to try and remove the need for developers, which means you're going to try and buy a platform that does more of that stuff out of the box.
So following on from that, then, I was just going to say, what advice do you have for recruiters and hiring managers going forward then?
For me, I think it's one of the things. I think kind of advice for developers and hiring managers is like, as a developer, don't just like pigeonhole yourself into just CMS development. Like, try and broaden your skills a bit so you have an appreciation of what's happening under the hood. You know, try and get involved with application development. Try and get involved with a bit of sort of a cloud serverless technology, or just dabble in something else and understand sort of those good patterns that are built into those CMSs. Kind of understand how they've been used and use them yourself in your own way. Then you're instantly sort of broadening kind of what jobs you could get, and then you're broadening kind of what is looked upon from like a recruiter. They aren't just going to be looking just for a psycho expert. You know, you're going to stand out a lot further. You're going to have just general good sort of, let's say, C# application development experience, as well as that CMS experience, which then kind of opens you to sort of more solution architecture roles and sort of understanding the bigger picture, not just building a little CMS that does something very small.
Yeah, following on to that, in my last company, we were building, obviously, Embraco websites, and if a developer went off and said, yeah, we built a website using Embraco, that sounds really unimpressive. But if you start talking about how it was built and what technologies were being used and what patterns were being used, then it starts to become more interesting. So then an Embraco website, okay, well, where was it hosted? It was hosted on Azure. We used Azure DevOps pipelines. We had some automation to transfer databases between environments using PowerShell. We used the repository pattern to talk to a database. We used Elasticsearch or Azure Search in that scenario. And you start talking about the architecture of the solution as a whole, end to end, including all of the infrastructure, and then it suddenly becomes an interesting conversation. Whereas you may have started with, I built a website using Embraco. That sounds really, not very impressive.
Yeah, and there's so many skills there, and you've just mentioned as well, Anthony, where you're looking at, like Azure Search, you're looking at actually like understanding sort of serverless technology in Azure. All of those are sort of skill sets that a lot of developers don't have as well. So getting yourself a little bit of exposure to all of those things, and it will make a big difference.
And just being able to talk about those things. I mean, developers often deploy to, say, an Azure App Service, not realizing what that actually is. Well, it's a serverless compute instance, basically, and you can scale it out and scale it up. It's automatically load balanced. You can add I don't know, some load tests for that using Loader.io. If you're doing a corporate site, you may want to do some security penetration tests using Detectify. So you add all these things together, and suddenly you start sounding like a solutions architect, not a website developer or CMS developer.
Yeah. So I would say, sorry, this is Mohammed. I'm driving as well, but I'm really enjoying this chat now. So I would say that because all of these roles, Anthony, you mentioned about, sometimes the recruiters and also the project managers, they consider these roles for infra people, not for the actual developers.
So I'm really struggling to hear you.
Sorry, Mohammed. Yeah, I think we're struggling to hear you a little bit, but thanks so much. And I know that you're driving, so I really appreciate it. Mark, what do you think about advice for developers?
I think exactly what Anthony said, that every website or build you come across, there is always opportunity to learn some new tech. And I think absolutely embracing that and learning it and trying your best is a good way of growing. I mean, I think everyone, when they start looking through their careers, had to start somewhere. Right? So I think absolutely, yeah, I look at what I did when I started with Episerver, and when I started more specializing in that one, I did a blog post around, hey, wouldn't it be cool if Episerver had their own NuGet feed? Just as NuGet, or NuPack as it was called then, was a big new Microsoft thing. On my blog now, that's when I managed to start talking with David Fowler, who now is one of the more senior people in the .NET world, and he was commenting on my post. It felt really cool. All of a sudden, I found a little niche where I was like, you know what, actually, this is cool. I'm talking with some of the cool Microsoft people, and that was just pushing a little bit, right, and using that niche. So I always think there's always opportunity to learn here, and I don't think, I certainly have not had any problem from specializing as a CMS developer, but I think that's also because I've tried to do that grounding and look a little bit further out. So the other side of this, and I think this is another really important point, when we say there's a stigma of CMS developers are bad, it's not necessarily because that person is a, incompetent person that wants to do a bad job. It's normally just that they've been misclassified, oversold. They are no doubt trying to achieve and fix something that is probably slightly beyond their skill set then. And I think there's a little way we've got to try and support those people. I don't want to stigmatize them. We've all been there. We've all been asked to do something on, oh my God, I have literally no idea how I am going to do that. Right? And the best people are the ones that say, well, I'm going to try and find out. Right? I'm going to say I don't know. I'm going to be honest, but I'm going to try and find out because that's the only way you improve. So, some of those people, and I know when I look back, there are, and when I talk around the subject, there's one person I remember who was really out of his depth, right? And he'd been, put in that position where he's been told, great, we used to have, and this was way back in the day, we used to have a front page website, or it was something basic like that, a client. And then they made a huge investment and said, we've now got Episerver. And the ask from his manager was, great, now you can make all the changes on Episerver. And he was like, I have no idea how to do this, and was asking lots of questions that if I'd have not given him the time, you could just easily dismiss it going, he's really stupid. Why doesn't he know? But actually, it's because he didn't know. He wasn't stupid. And he had a massive step up to make. And I'd love to catch up with him now and find out where he is, because I have no doubt he's a massively successful developer somewhere. But, at that time, God, the poor guy was struggling so much. I genuinely felt for him.
Yeah, I've got one point as well to add to sort of expanding your skills. Like a lot of the CMSs that I've worked with, a lot of them allow you to sort of extend them or expand them, sort of create your own custom areas, or sort of create sort of packages that can be shared across other solutions. And to do that, you need to understand sort of how the platform works, actually what's going under the hood, and just general good software sort of design patterns to build something that works well. And so if you do expose yourself to traditional development, not CMS development, and actually understand kind of how to build an application from scratch, that will allow you then to get into and really extend your ability to work in that content management system. So yeah, let's say you're creating a custom section in a Braco or a Siteport. You've got to understand sort of good software development and not just understand CMS development, so building items or constructing stuff like that.
Yeah, I a good developer, I think, can learn to be a good CMS developer and learn how to use a platform like Umbraco, Sitecore, anything Episerver well if they want to do it. Now, again, it's a choice, but it's that fundamental underneath, isn't it? If you're a good developer and you understand the MVC framework, you'll be able to pick up that knowledge on Episerver and use it, right? You'll be able to pick up that knowledge on Umbraco. There is definitely a learning curve on that one. You're not just going to be able to do it tomorrow, but you'll have that fundamentals, right? And that's actually where I think some of the better, more developer-friendly platforms are. Umbraco and Episerver are architecturally quite similar, and they leverage MVC in really, I guess, pretty similar ways, and blend in with that pattern well. So, it's not a huge step to look at an Episerver solution and say, I'm an MVC developer, I sort of get that bit. There are some bits where it's a little bit more obscure, certainly, in particular features around templating and routing. But, there is reasons why it's been built that way. And actually, learning all of that stuff is going to make you better and more able to use that platform well.
Yeah, I can agree more.
I've seen some very, very intricate, complex, advanced implementations in Umbraco, and it is all C#. So if I was C# developer who had done MVC and was quite advanced, I would look at this code and say, this is the MVC pattern. and I understand it, and I can recognize good code when I see it. And it had all types of good modern patterns. It was using services, using a factory, using a repository pattern. It was using a mediator pattern. Even like it's all of these things that you would normally do in MVC and C# were there written by a C# developer. It just so happened that there was this tool that was helping in the background called a CMS. And just like any other tool, a tool is only as good as the person that wields it. So it does take time to learn. And I just thought of an interesting analogy. Is there any such thing as a bootstrap developer? Because bootstrap grid is used everywhere, all over the internet. No one is really labeled as a bootstrap developer. Oh, you use bootstrap to do the grid. Well, you're not a real developer. Well, why would I write my own grid when bootstrap already does it, and it's an accepted like gold standard for dealing with media queries and different sized screens?
That's a really good point, actually. I think if you kind of like flip it on its head, sort of like front-end development and what a front-end developer could be or they couldn't be, where they are just a bootstrap developer where they sort of put stuff together without really knowing anything, really. You could put together a site with just reusing bootstrap and not even putting any sort of custom styles or any JavaScript into your site. And that could be used an example where you could just build a CMS using packages. Like, there's a lot of stuff ready to go that you could build.
Yeah.
But just to tarnish that type of developer as a bad developer or to tarnish in any way is unfair, because a front-end developer could be someone who's really experienced as in like from a React or Vue.js perspective, where they are very sort of, they understand sort of a complex JavaScript.
Yeah.
No, it's really good, guys. What about for hiring managers and recruiters then? What advice would you have for them when they're hiring these people?
I mean, I don't think it's rocket science, to be honest, around that one. Again, it's good principles and discipline behind this. So, if you're a hiring manager, look a little bit beyond someone's job title. That's, I think, another reason why you get stigma. A CMS consultant doesn't accurately describe to me what that person does, because it could be they're a hugely experienced person that has a great knowledge of that platform and product and has got a massive amount of implementation experience and is a hugely valuable person. I might need one on my project. Also, a CMS consultant can be someone that just does the administration side, as we talked around on, on an episode or sidecar part. Might not be what I want. So, look a little bit beyond someone's job title and look at their experience and match that up from what you need. Now, to do that as a hiring manager, you've got to know what you need and you've got to be able to understand that platform. And I think, as we said, there are certainly some times, I've been in that position before where I'm trying to hire for a platform that I don't really understand, right? And that's always risky. And that's when I'm going to go and rely on the recruiters to help me. So if I don't know that, I need the recruiters to know that. I need them to understand the marketplace. And as I'm sure, Annie, you would probably agree with, there are some great recruiters around here and there are some not so good recruiters. We could probably do this whole meetup again around recruitment consultants, couldn't we? Because there's probably a stigma around them as well. It's the...
what stigma?
Don't go
We're all
there.
fantastic.
Recruiters have our best interests at heart, don't they? They're not interested in commissions.
Nah, it's all pro bono. All pro bono.
But I know full well that given a brief, Annie would go away and look at the experience and start. She understands a bit more around the background and further around the CMS. So all of those things we've sort of said as a developer you should do, actually to understand that tech and help get the right person in the right role, you've got to be able to do from a recruiter point of view. So any good hiring process, you've got to dig a little bit deeper than first impressions, and that's the same here.
I think
you made
it's
a really
really,
good point, Mark.
Sorry.
Sorry, go on, Anthony.
So in terms of hiring, I was just about to say that I've interviewed like countless people and seen countless CVs over the years, and I can say personally I really suck at being interviewed, but I'm really good at interviewing people because I know what I want. And in my own experience of being interviewed, that interview experience is just artificial, and unless you can answer questions in the way that the interviewer wants, you might not get the job. Whereas as an interviewer, I take the perspective of this person is nervous. I know this because I am in an interview myself, and what I need from them is to be able to, for them to tell me what I need to hear. So I will guide the person to get the answers that I need. Obviously, it's much easier if they volunteer it themselves, if they're confident and they can just tell you, but the interview experience is totally artificial. So if I need to know that someone has some experience using a certain technology, I'll just ask, and I'll ask about a project that they worked on it. If I need to know if they can architect a solution, then I'll ask them, and I won't just try to trick them into answering in a poor way. I mean, even something like a coding test. In the past, I would have just said, okay, do this coding test, and then I would just see what that would come back to me. And these days, I say specifically what I'm looking for in the coding test, so that I can know that they can follow the instructions and actually deliver.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think a lot of interviews, candidates are kind of set up to fail sometimes, where either they want to be belittled by the interviewer, how mighty that they are that they're interviewing you, or they're just sort of trick questions where they want a very specific niche answer about maybe a very set like software design pattern that maybe isn't used that often, and that's very unfair. I think the best way to conduct an interview is just to create a natural conversation and sort of to start talking about it and allowing the candidate to relax and just get chatting about sort of software, and then invite them to the answering the question you're actually after.
Yeah, guide them. Like if the person knows the answer, and then you can guide them into answering it. But if they don't know the answer, it's going to be very clear that they don't know the answer. But the nervousness of someone in an interview process really clouds the interviewer's judgment. So asking hard questions doesn't make any sense. Because I'm not going to be asking trick questions in the workplace to my colleagues to try to catch them out.
Sometimes just give them the answer to one of, if they're not really getting there, just give them the answer. Okay, this is kind of what I'm looking for, and then move on, and then sort of start getting that conversation. So it relaxes them straight away, and then hopefully they start answering the questions and kind of you've given that instant guidance of what way you're trying to go with these questions.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll give you my view on interviews. I think they are single-handedly the worst way of identifying whether someone is good to work with. Right? However, they are they're probably about the best way that we have. What I really love, wouldn't it be an ideal world if you do, you know what, Joe, I think you might be good. I've got a gap in my team. Come and work with me. Come and work with me for 2 or 3 days. Let's test it out. That's what you want to do, but the job market just doesn't allow you to do that, really. And so, you end up with all of these artificial solutions to doing that. And I absolutely hate them. I hate being on one side and I hate on the other just because they are so fake.
Mark, you make a really good point on hiring for technology that you're maybe not so experienced or don't even know at all. That could be very tricky. I mean, my advice would be try not immediately trying to hire for that technology. Your client needs that, and you have to get a developer for that. But even look for maybe a specialist that as a contractor that come in that can assist you with that interview. Don't try and sort of hire someone for something you don't understand. Pay someone a cheaper day rate to come in and help you get the right developers on.
Yeah, absolutely. I was I guess lucky in that I didn't recruit someone that was wrong, but also I was unlucky because I copped a load of pressure by the fact that we weren't having huge amounts of progress. We end up getting a contractor in, and that was easier. It's lower risk, right? We're probably veering away from a little bit from CMS at the minute, aren't we? Honey, I've just spotted there's some really interesting questions actually on the chat channel. I don't know if you've seen those.
Oh no, I haven't actually. Let's read a couple out then. So Bill has said, I think a lot of recent stigma for CMS developers is that most of the big C# platforms are still using .Dotnet Framework instead of .Net Core. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a really good point, because actually all of the bigger platforms, they are slower moving because, migrating from .Net Framework to .Net Core is, as much as there is a great pathway for doing that one, really, it's effort. And on big platforms where you've got to maintain them, you've got to think around things like how are you going to do that in a way that minimizes impact to customers. It takes years of planning. Episerver are just going through that. They've been thinking around it for 2 or 3 years, and they're just about to bring out their .NET Core solution. But there isn't really a great upgrade path on that. I think they've done it quite sensibly. I won't go into too many details, but yeah, absolutely. You know, you get developers coming and going, I want to work on .NET Core, and you go, well, sorry, we're on .NET Framework at the minute. You know, and absolutely, I agree, Bill. I think that's a really good point, Billy, that it's there is stigma because of that one, because everyone wants to work on the latest tech, but there's a lead time on a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, if you're stuck using .NET Framework, there can be a stigma of, oh, you're using this old technology, .NET Framework, but hang on, it's still using the latest version of C#. So the actual framework is basically the runtime on the server. Just because you can't package .NET Framework in a Docker container and deploy it, like, doesn't mean that it's bad.
I agree. Like, I am way too much of a dinosaur now. I've moved on. You know, I'm set in my ways. That, you know, I just look at it and say, you know, that my honest question when everyone says, why are you not using .NET Core, is why should I be using .NET Core at the minute? What's the benefit compared to the effort it's going to take me to get there, right? What's that value conversation? Sometimes I'm sure there's good benefits on smaller apps, or maybe when you've got huge rigs and you need to, you know, running them on Linux containers is going to lower your infrastructure costs. Brilliant. But on some of those cases, actually, it's not straightforward. Yeah. Sure
that doesn't determine whether a developer is any good or not, though.
Yeah.
Which is the key thing. Yeah. So yeah, your infrastructure cost may be lower because you're using a .NET Core and everything, but developers still could be just as bad as another developer.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Someone in the chat just wrote that C#8 is only on Core 3. That's a shame.
Yeah, Stuart has also said that WordPress and its ecosystem is single-handedly keeping PHP developers employable, and perhaps one day the same could be true for Umbraco and Sitecore, keeping .NET devs alive. What do you guys think?
I think you can't compare PHP and .NET. Like, .NET is a programming language.
Oh.
But it's like .NET Core is a constantly evolving framework that a lot of the CMSs are really pushing to go towards it. Like, as you say, Episervers is nearly there. Sitecore has been trying to get there for a long time, and I think Umbraco are close to getting there as well. Yeah, and there's like loads of other CMSs out there that are built on .NET and moving to .NET Core. So it's not a dying framework at all. And I think
anything is getting bigger.
Yeah, I think because there's so many more .NET Core developers out there now than maybe 10 years ago that were .NET Framework developers, that it will open the market even more. Once we've got like all the CMSs or a large proportion of them are in .NET Core, or you can build mini micro apps off those CMS frameworks, it will open the pool of what developers can work on CMS solutions as well, or that would easily be able to move into a CMS project.
Yep.
Sorry, on Stuart's point, I absolutely agree, right? I think regardless of what your feelings are around PHP as a good programming language, and there's a whole other debate in that one, it's a programming language. It does work. It does provide solutions. The fact that you've got the most popular CMS in the world built on it is testament to that, right? And I think it's a great thing, right? You know, what you're really saying is that if I made a decision 10 years ago, like I did, probably more than that, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I'm a dinosaur now, around what's the programming language to use? Actually, even if you chose PHP at that point, the wrong decision, right? You're still going to have plenty of things to work on now. You know, you're going to have to reskill at some point. And as much as we feel that safety net of being Microsoft developers here could happen to us, if Microsoft hadn't have changed course on .NET, you know, and made a big re-architecture and moved towards .NET Core, you know, .NET Framework may have become legacy. Who knows?
But I think that's why it's a good idea to broaden your skills. You know, don't just stick to CMS development. Look at application development, because those skills are then transferable just to CMS skills. You know, once you understand how CMSs work under the hood, a lot of them work the same way. It doesn't matter what they're built upon. But same with just general sort of application development. If you understand design patterns, they can be transferred between languages.
Yeah, and the CMS is just a tool. So once all the CMSs are on .NET Core, then it's going to be, well, which one do I pick? And eventually, I think developers and hiring managers and companies are going to realize, hang on, why are our developers spending months writing code when they can just use one of these really good CMS platforms, some of them being totally free, others being enterprise price, and everything in between. Why would we spend 5 months building something that already comes out of the box? And then it becomes a business decision, and then people will start saying, look, now everyone needs to learn a CMS because this is going to save your company money.
I think especially with that on like the CMS is now offering these sort of headless solutions. They don't act to provide a website, for example. They can provide data now to anything else, not just sort of a traditional web platform. It can be sort of more of an internal system or whatever. I think it will open those opportunities even further.
Yeah, out of the box, if you just wanted to go headless, you get a back office interface that has user and member management with an ability to structure your data types however you like, your data models, and then built into this you have an API which is RESTful. Okay,
yeah.
Try to build that from scratch for a company. It will take months. Yeah. You might end up having a Hertz.
Yeah, Jason's just asked that, hasn't he? Just looking at what would you say to an organisation that decides to build its own CMS from the ground up?
Do it.
We have to answer that.
Do it. Like just to feel the pain. You got to learn the hard way.
It's a bad idea. Unless that organisation is designed to lose money and doesn't care about the bottom line and just wants to go and have fun and experiment, or unless that organisation is trying to get into the CMS marketplace, it's probably a very, very bad idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm interested in Jason's other question as well, actually. So he said, somewhat generalization, but I found that CMS developers end up understanding the business domain better compared to application developers. Have you had a similar experience?
Yes, absolutely. It is because, in my opinion, that CMS developers, like good, and by CMS developers, I mean good C# developers who know how to program using a good tool. The way you model business interactions, like your organization, your entities within the company, all of these things can be visually represented in a CMS, and things become a lot easier to understand when you see a nicely laid out form, for instance, opposed to a database table, which is just rows and columns. Like it's very hard to understand a company or entities within a system if you're just looking at database rows. But if you look at a back office, how everything is configured, you might see a tree, some icons, some visual cues to help you understand, oh, that's what the organization looks like and what they need. How do you determine this from schema of a SQL database? It's very, very difficult.
I absolutely agree on that. CMS development, what I liked around it is it's tangible, right? It's tangible because you get to see more of an output. I didn't find it particularly enjoyable looking at database tables. SQL Server Management Studio is a beautiful tool, but it's a bit boring from my point of view. I like looking at web pages, and you're just consumed by that information. You're surrounded by it, aren't you? You're learning around what the company wants to market about itself, or if you're doing, what products it wants to sell. And you just naturally, because you're closer to it, pick up a lot of that domain knowledge around the business. And I absolutely love that. That's why, probably one of the reasons why I loved CMS. And I probably wouldn't have been able to describe it so well. So thank you for doing that, Stuart.
Yeah, it's great.
And Jason, sorry.
Feel free to just jump in with any questions now, guys, and just keep them coming if you have them.
Yeah, I'll answer Stuart's one around whether it's black and white. Actually, any CMS nowadays is pretty much a framework for building a website, and I'm sure we've all used CMSs to do things that are slightly outside of content management. Episerver, I've used lots of it, where actually you effectively do what I call content modeling, which is you're really using it as a pre-built database, right? A database with auditing history, with a user interface to allow you to edit and manage that data and that configuration. And again, there's some of the quite interesting projects, and they're good tools for doing that, actually. And they give you a really good start on that one. Sometimes they don't quite match. Yeah, you do end up having to build plugins or extend them. You just got to be really careful there that it can be extended in that way, right? And that's where you end up with some really great solutions and also some really horrific solutions the same way when it's been bent in the wrong way.
that's when actually being a good C# developer actually comes in. Like, yes, I have a tool that's extendable. Do I need to extend it firstly? So you shouldn't just write code because you want to. And if you do need to extend it, are you going to architect a good solution for this extension? Because you can't just throw code at it and expect it to work well.
Yeah, it's great.
Fab.
Any more questions?
Not a question, but I'm going to add one thing. I think you guys can hear me now better because I think I'm in a better signal zone.
Yeah, it's a little bit better, Mohammed. Go for it.
Yeah, actually, it's related to your question about the hiring managers. And I agree to what Anthony was saying as well. But there's a bit of a point to add, which is basically, I think hiring managers need to be more connected with the technical lead. Number one, to understand the actual need of the role thereafter, whether it is from the front end or from the back end developer perspective. Number two is that they need to be more open, speaking to the candidates, asking them to basically elaborate well about their expertise. At the same time, be more precise within the areas of the need of the project as well. So I think because I myself have seen this kind of like a gap, then what happens that the actual initiative is taken by the HR people who filters down the CVs and profiles, and then they provide those candidates to the technical leadership. And the major problem then technical leadership they face, they're like, okay, out of 10 candidates they have been trying to interview, only like half of them were good enough to spend time with. So there was like, you can say, waste of energy as well from both parties. This is why I think they need to partner more with the technical leadership to have more better understanding of the need of the application thereafter. For example, one application, as we were talking about Bootstrap, maybe it is not going to require much custom code. So maybe you can better off going for a junior level of front-end developer. But if the need is for a good level of React kind of a developer, then there you go.
I think that's a really good point, actually, about there needs to be more of a partnership between the hiring managers, the tech lead, and HR, because as you say, that can cause a bit of a blockage. Is that something that the rest of you have found when recruiting?
I think you always need to get everyone involved, get everyone's opinion, everyone's kind of view on kind of what's needed, not just have a hiring manager, not just have the tech lead doing the interviewing, or just not just doing a recruiter just doing the interview, for example. Yeah, everyone needs to be part of that because everyone's got a view of kind of what's needed for the project.
And the organization as a whole. So,
so even as like a tech director or a tech lead, don't just do the interview on your own. Get one of your other developers in. Like get one of your other maybe not so senior developers in to understand the challenges they're going through. Is this candidate actually someone that they feel that they could work with and that they could get help from?
Yeah, I think it's always just a good idea to have two people there because it's easy to make mistakes. You know, on a natural human level, we all subconsciously make opinions and have opinions about people on first impressions, and it's very easy to forget that, or maybe not interrogate in the right way. If you've got two people in the room, it's less likely to happen.
Yeah, I actually prefer it that my devs interview before me. Because ultimately they're the ones that have to work with the developer, like every single day. So I'll gladly look at a CV and say, yeah, they have the right skills. Let's bring them in and have a talk. But I prefer that other people not make the decision, but are heavily involved. It shouldn't just be up to me because I'm not the one sitting next to them every single day.
You're accountable but not responsible, right?
Isn't that what managers do?
So what else can developers do at work because a lot of you have spoken about increasing and broadening your skill set so that you're not pigeonholing yourself too much, but what can devs do at work to do that and to broaden their skill set?
I think speak to your co-workers. Is there any other, before you start going online, is there any other of your co-workers that have got expertise or knowledge of other technologies or other sort of areas of what's of interest to them. And then if not, then they start looking online, try to get maybe on like Pluralsight or like LinkedIn videos, and just try to do, one a week or something, just something that interests you. It doesn't even have to be of any benefit to what you're currently on, just to start broadening your skills and seeing what else is out there.
Yeah.
In the last few.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, good, Mark.
All right. Yeah, I was just thinking on that, not just taking the training. I always find that trying to get involved in an open source project is a really nice way. Certainly if it's a big enough one, because you end up working with different people who may have different skills. And again, I've personally always found it easier to learn by doing. And I think that's, watching videos is easy. Well, not easy, is interesting, but I find it easier to learn by doing. So getting open source stuff was a really good way for me.
Yeah, so when I was talking about the videos, I definitely look at doing video courses that you have to either build something as you go along with the video, not just watching something and expect someone to learn from that.
Part of that, in the last current company and the last two that I was at, I introduced the Tech Links channel in Slack. I'm using Teams now, but it's the same principle. Anytime you come across something interesting, just throw it in the channel. If people are interested in that as well, they'll click on it. And it's a great way to share, just kind of passively absorb knowledge as well. Just be able to know, oh, there's that thing that person posted in the channel. I remember what it was called. I'll go look that up, and then that's how you build knowledge around the team. Yeah,
I think it's a really good point, that one. I mean, we're probably preaching for converted here, aren't we? Because everybody who's spending their time at 6 o'clock in the evening on a meetup is obviously invested in their career in some way. So my advice is keep doing it. You're doing the right thing, actually. Hopefully we've imparted a little bit of knowledge, but yeah, there's always a lot of knowledge out there. Just be a little bit inquisitive around that and invest a bit of time, and it will absolutely help.
And if the platform that you're using is open source, take a look at the source.
Yeah.
There's a question from Jason here. Do you guys look at a candidate's personal GitHub during hiring?
Yes. It actually tells a few stories. It firstly shows what they're interested in personally, and if it's not just forks from, like my personal GitHub is mostly forks at the moment, because I'm interested in the code. But if there's actual code that they wrote themselves, it gives you a good idea of what they've learned and the types of patterns that they prefer to use, their go-to patterns. Like things like the cleanliness of the code, whether they like, I don't know, tabs or spaces, that old universal debate. By the way, it should be tabs.
It also sparks conversation there as well, doesn't it? You can start asking them about kind of what was their thinking of when they were building this. They've obviously got a real investment of this code that they've written. And it allows you to then sort of challenge them on their own code in obviously a non-aggressive way.
Yeah, a well-maintained and big, broad GitHub profile page with lots of repositories you've been involved in tells a really good story around you as a developer. Although it's not the only thing I'd look at. If you don't have a GitHub page, that's not a problem. The same way as a personal blog, it's the same sort of thing, isn't it? It's your public expression and public brand. It reflects well if you've got one, but it's not a necessity. It's a kind of a nice to have, I think. And it just helps. It helps that interview process is what I really think. It helps you get to know that person, right, and what they're interested in terms of the projects they've done or what technologies they've used or how much they adhere to coding guidelines to make Anthony happy, and whether they're a spaces or a tab person, who knows? But it just helps you get to know somebody. So I will absolutely go and look at everywhere I possibly can to find that person. We all have a pretty big social footprint now, and companies, there are big companies that do that in a really, really almost scary way in terms of identifying candidates, from their social feeds as well. So it's absolutely, it's there. It's valuable info.
Yeah, Stuart's just mentioned about Stack Overflow helping as well, which which is really relevant as well, isn't it? Does anyone have any other questions that you want to ask these guys as we wrap up? What if the candidate has been using only private repos or Bitbucket?
It's all right.
And yeah.
Like I said, it's not having it isn't a problem. It's just a really great thing if you do have it. Does that mean that you will necessarily be a better candidate? No, actually, that's the challenge of the interview, right? You've got a load of information over here. You might have more information there. And the challenge of the interview is trying to sift through to find the best fit. The more
just gives the recruiter more info on you as an individual to make a decision.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't have public repos, then you need to be able to convey the same information. I mean, even if you brought some code to the interview and said, "Hey, I want to show you this. It's a project. It's not publicly available, but I want to show you how good I am." Like that would be great. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, I had somebody who came who's probably up there with one of the best devs, and he came in and showed me an ORM that he'd written. Now, this was in the days of Link to SQL, where it wasn't madness to start writing one of those. I think it was a little bit of madness, but actually, the way he just approached it and what he talked around it, you just knew that he was someone that liked to go and pick things apart and then build them himself to kind of work it out. So even though it was never something that would probably get used in production, it was a learning exercise for him, and it reflected really well on him. And yeah, he was a good hire, really good hire.
Yeah, cool, great. Well, we've come up to the end of the hour. So honestly, guys, thanks so much, because that was, I think we packed a lot in there, which was really, really good. I will make this session, it has been recorded, so I'll make it available to everyone so you can watch it back at your leisure. Next week, just so everyone knows, we've got Peter Wallace giving a talk about his career progression to CTO. He's the CTO of Sporting Group. That'll be a really good talk as well, so please do come along. But otherwise, you've got some positive comments on here, guys. Thanks so much, that's super helpful, and great stuff. I think we've all become a little bit wiser.
Great, thanks everyone.
Yeah, good luck everyone.
Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Have a lovely evening, everyone.
Here you go.
You too, see ya.
Thanks.